Um, and what else did I want to say? There was something else. Oh, and I also find, like I said, Sauron to be a very realistic, probably one of his most realistic characters in terms of
Mm-hmm.
um, how he functions, because he's not Morgoth. He's like you just said, he's like the loser that, like from animes, that the loser that wants to be the bad guy and keeps fucking up and keeps fucking up, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot what else I wanted to say, but I think that's pretty much the main things about this character. So it's interesting, right? It's an interesting story. There's a lot in there. You don't need to change any of it. Um, we didn't read about Numenorians. We'll read that, but you don't need to change any of that. There's so much already there. I don't understand why
Yeah,
they
and they
why
don't
why
realize
is
it.
Galadriel even involved? If you wanted to create a strong female character, she can be involved, but she doesn't. The way they're depicting her, you see what I'm saying, doesn't make any. She's not involved in any of this. She would have never been seduced by him. You saw what he said. The elves were not, the Noldor were not seduced, and she's a Noldor. Gil-galad is a Noldor. Elrond is technically half elven of the Noldor. The only ones that were seduced were the ones in Eregion, and it was because they loved, you saw what he said, they loved craftsmanship. So with the whole like, ooh, you're
Yeah.
gonna teach us how to make the most amazing rings ever? Yeah, let's go for it. No mention of
Yeah,
Mithril.
I think
Go ahead.
right. Did I think they got the wrong elves, maybe. Like in the show. Like they were trying to show this happening and they wanted familiar faces so the public would come and watch because, familiar faces. But they got the wrong elves. The Galadriels and uh
Yeah.
thing that actually didn't get corrupted by this idea just for the sake of making it a thing that people would recognize. And that's so, like, now that I know that is so funny.
Well,
That is
yeah,
very much funny.
it is funny, right? And I think they do it because Tolkien came from a. I mean, Tolkien is literally like he would have been Granny's uncle. You know what I mean? Look at Granny, how
Yeah.
she thinks. Like it was a different era. It was very patriarchal.
Yeah.
Female characters were not center stage as characters of strength or characters of action. Men were. So he was of that age. So how do
Mm-hmm.
you translate something like that into our time where there's so much push to create strong female characters and female characters that are, you know, part of the plot? It was a natural decision to pick Galadriel. I'm not saying it was a bad one. I'm just saying that the way they're handling it is creating a different character that doesn't add.
Yeah, they use the shell of the person
There you
rather
go.
than the
There you go.
actual person. They're
Yeah.
using, that's what I was saying too. They were using a known face to tell a story
There you go.
that had nothing to do with the actual character,
And
just to
I
get people watching it.
and yes, I wouldn't even have a problem with them using Galadriel. The problem that I have is that their writing is atrocious. They
Yeah,
instead
yeah,
of giving me a very interesting,
yes,
nuanced type of Galadriel where we really get to know about her. I know they gave us background on her, but the background isn't real either. Instead of giving me a good
yeah, true.
background on her, show me the motivation behind her, show me the strength behind her, show me that she's a family woman, that she has a husband. Doesn't mean that she has to be subservient, subservient to him or second to him. He can be the stay-at-home dad, whatever. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
but show me a nuanced character that is intelligent and is keeping a pace with the Sauron character, rather than a person that seems to be, what? I love him. He confused me, and then you're giving me that with Elrond anyway. Elrond is the character
Exactly.
that is nuanced in this story and that is up to par with Sauron. The only two characters we have on this show is Sauron and Elrond. Everybody else, they're just dumbasses. Did you notice that?
Yeah, they're just there.
And
Yep.
that's my problem. It's that the writing. I don't even have a problem with taking the licenses. The writing is what you're. If you're gonna do that bad a job, stick to what's on. Stick to what we know, because you should do better.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do that, you should do better. And the last thing that I had wanted to say about the decay factor,
Mm-hmm.
right? We keep decaying so that by the
Yeah.
time we get to the third age, we have freaking hobbits. And the hobbits are literally useless because they're so fucking small and they're so tiny, right? And they literally, you know what I mean? They're not
Mm-hmm.
they're like half a human. That's why they're called halflings technically. And
Yeah, yeah.
the point of why they even exist is an important lesson, which is that at the end of the day, fighting evil, or this constant battle that we have on earth with this negativity, is not going to be fought through fighting, right? It's not going to be fought through violence, because the violence, it's always about who's more powerful, and at the end, you saw, they all fall, right? As strong
Yep. Yeah.
as strong as Gil-galad and Elendil were, and Sauron was at that moment, they all fell. Nobody won, really, if you think about it. Everybody lost that war, and a bunch of people died. So what do we have? A constant repetition that war just begets more war, just begets more war. And we get finally to the hobbits, who say, who can't really fight like that because of how small they are. So what they do is they support each other. They are strength for each other through their caring for each other, through their having their each other's backs, and they take the one ring and they throw it in the freaking, in the they destroy it, which
In
is
the
basically
trash.
just
Yeah.
they destroy the power and they destroy the thing that everybody is obsessing over for domination. Because what are you gonna do after that? When you no longer have those two,
Yeah.
when you no longer have your toys, now we're back. Now everybody's on the same footing. And I think that's what he's trying to say in that regard, where he's like, at the end of the day, none of that is going to solve the problem. You could have the biggest army of good people versus the biggest army of the so-called bad people, and they're just going to destroy each other and kill each other, and at the end of the day no one's going to be any better, just like, well, like you said, just like World War I, what he experienced, and then we experienced it again with
Mm-hmm.
World War II, and nothing, and ever since, and it's not getting any better. At the end of the day, he's saying, but if you guys, you don't even need to be big fighters. If you could just support each other, stand by each other for what you know is right, and
Yeah.
disavow all of this, disavow the entire premise of why we're fighting, by removing the tools that make us feel powerful over each other, you would have solved the problem. But
Yep.
the but the
But you
temp
didn't.
but the temptation is so great. That's why even in the story, like, the next part of this is Isildur, like you saw, he cut off the ring, and he was supposed to. The idea was, hey, he was they were the plan was cut the ring, right, get the ring off of Sauron and throw it in the fire so that it will be destroyed. But the moment Isildur got it, he immediately got seduced, which, as he talks about here, right, he gets seduced, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, I could use the ring for good. And it's like, no, the problem is the ring. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you know,
I mean,
you,
it's
you you can use the ring for good, sure, but that's not the point. Like, it's gonna corrupt you, and you're not gonna want to use it for good anymore.
or not, yeah, or not even just the hubris of thinking that what you think is good, right? Isn't that what I always? That's isn't that
Yeah.
always the problem with people? Yeah, what I'm doing is good, and that guy's the bad guy. Well, who says? Who says you're doing any good? The moment you're using anything,
Yeah.
the moment you're using anything at your disposal to manipulate other people, you're the bad guy already, and that's the problem.
Or
And
in
that's
general,
yeah.
like, if we wanna do the war comparison again, any person that's a foe and a villain on one side, it's the other side's hero.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
And you just how do you quantify that, how do you
yeah.
quantify, and that's a big question, but that's that's why this is a timeless classic within fantasy stories, because that's the core of the story. The core at the end of the day of the story is that none of this stuff matters. You can keep fighting or you can remove the tools, but it takes tremendous humility, tremendous affection for your fellow man to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot, and it's and we keep getting sucked in by Sauron. You see that? Like we keep getting sucked in into, oh, but that guy is better off than you. That's wrong. Don't you think that's wrong? The whole, the whole fight of the
Yeah,
haves
yeah.
and the have-nots. He manipulates that always to get people angry. And if you think about it, all political movements work that way, where they're like, the Communist
Oh,
Party
yeah,
worked
for
that
sure.
way, the Socialist Party worked that way, capitalism works. Every political movement, regardless of how you want to look, which side you're on that, it's
Yeah, no,
ultimately
you're always thinking you're moved by good ideas, but it ends
right.
up being that you justify the end with the, sorry, you justify the means with the end result. And you end up losing the plot in between all that, losing what
Right.
you were doing and the reason why you were doing it
Right. And the
altogether.
tragedy is that in the midst of losing the plot, like you're saying, people die, homes get destroyed,
Mm-hmm.
and people lose everything and suffer
Exactly.
needlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that, and it's
Yep.
all because at the end of the day, that ring needs to be thrown in the fire, and it's only gonna be done by a person who is so humble, so selfless, so small, right, in the sense of like, they can't literally like with the hobbits, right, they cannot literally contribute to the actual fight. They've got no power. They've got no weapons. They've got no special ability. They've got no bloodline. They've got no training. Like they literally cannot uh, really contribute.
Do anything.
Yeah, they really can't contribute
Yeah.
to a war, to a domination of power and abilities. So therefore, they are the least possible to be corrupted by something like the ring, because it's almost irrelevant. Almost, because, and I say
Yeah,
almost,
like what are you gonna do with power?
I
Because you have
right. I
none
I
already.
I say almost because even Frodo was tempted by the ring in the end, but that's kind of the whole.
Yeah, I remember.
Right, but that's kind of because that's how the ring works too. There's also a sense of heaviness and burden involved with
Yeah.
carrying it. That's why you need to cast it into the fire. It's genius. It's genius when you really realize what he broke down, and that his, you know what I mean? He could have made it like, and then finally the gods
Yeah,
came.
no, it
He could have
is.
done what he did in the first age, in a sense, and been like, and then the gods come and they save the world. That would have been like the Bible. He didn't do that in Lord of the Rings at all, right? Lord of the Rings is actually the first
Yeah.
time that there's no involvement of superpower people in resolving the conflict. It literally was these little hobbits and Gollum finally getting that stupid ring into the fire, because they were so humble, because they cared about each other more at the end of the day than the freaking ring.
Yeah.
Genius. And people don't see that. Like that's the real theme of this entire thing.